An inquiry into the case of the necrophiliac David Fuller has called for urgent regulation of funeral directors in England to safeguard the dignity of people who've died. Let's talk now to Andrew Judd, who's the Chief Executive of the National Association of Funeral Directors. Andrew, very good to talk to you today. For many reading about this report today, there will be absolute astonishment that there's no government regulation of the funeral service industry. We look at things like care homes, restaurants, amenities, they're all regulated. Why do you think your industry isn't?
Well, we absolutely welcome and share the Fuller Inquiry's call for independent regulator for the funeral profession. Obviously, the crimes of David Fuller were in a hospital environment, and he was an electrician. But the safeguarding of deceased matters wherever they are and wherever they are resting in that pathway. We're also really pleased that the inquiry has recognised that the majority of funeral directors are absolutely compassionate and operate with integrity to extremely high standards. About 70% of the funerals that are conducted in the United Kingdom are conducted under the scrutiny and the oversight of the National Association of Funeral Directors. But what we're calling for is that all funeral directors have to operate to a consistent level and standard of care, and that deceased people are safeguarded in whatever environment they are in. We're aware of
those figures there. Sorry to cut across you, Andrew, but you said 70% of funerals are sort of under the auspices of the National Association of Funeral Directors. That's 30% that aren't. And I think anybody who's buried a loved one recently would have imagined that all funeral directors would be regulated to the same level, that you'd be able to trust them all equally.
No, look, in a recent poll, 69% of people understandably accept that anyone that trades as a funeral director is operating under regulation, and that is not the case. And that is why we've been consistently calling for that, because you're right, we can control and supervise the people that are members of our trade association, but it's an entirely voluntary decision for the funeral director to join either our trade association or one of the other ones. So that means that people can elect to operate their business under scrutiny or not. And whilst we do have power to remove people from our membership, that means that they still operate in their business outside of scrutiny. So what we're calling on is that all deceased deserve the same level of respect, and all bereaved families are entitled to the appropriate levels of care and concern. I've been in the funeral sector for 40 years. I've worked operationally and at other levels in the profession. And the vast majority of funeral directors are committed and vocationally care about what they do. We have many, many funeral directors in the UK that have been part of their local communities for generations. The funeral directors care for the people that they know, and the funeral directors care for the people that they love. So whilst we are very supportive of the call for the government to regulate funeral directors, schools are regulated and care homes are regulated, even road sweepers are regulated. Tattoo parlours are regulated, but funeral directors are not. And you get one chance to choose a funeral director and for a funeral to take place. And whatever that choice is, we want to make sure that people can trust that there is a regime that covers all the funeral directors, not just those members of a trade association.
And Andrew, just to briefly, before we finish, I mean, if regulation is brought in, and of course we don't know how long it would take for it to be brought in, presumably it would take a little while, do you think that perhaps these 30% of funeral homes that currently don't voluntarily are involved in regulation, would they close, do you think? Are there bad apples in your industry? Because you talk about David Fuller being in a hospital setting, but there are also reports of people in your industry posing for pictures with dead bodies, allowing bodies to decompose. One report of somebody spitting on a body because they were an opposing football team supporter. Do you think there's a problem with some of the people who are employed in your industry?
I think there's a problem with some of the people that are employed in any industry, and that's why we are encouraging and calling for the government to put in place a robust code of practice that applies to all the funeral directors in the UK, a requirement for education and training, an independent complaint service for clients, and a comprehensive inspections regime. And in terms of the ability that we have, we cannot stop someone from trading at the moment. So unless somebody breaks the law, there is no statutory process in place. And we believe that the bereaved and the deceased that they mourn deserve better than that.